أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تسألون
Thank you. And notes.
Printed out, brilliant.
It's fine, we just share.
Yes.
You should do this.
Supposed to be loose.
We're supposed to make next week. We swap between you and you.
So the rest is going
The
to
rest is optional.
the one
Why are you still making
on one side.
24?
As in the past. That's what we gave in the 5 years.
Yes. But the flyers are being updated.
And that is not a Today is supposed to one.
It's not the correct one. Why is not correct? It's the first print. Why is what? So this one is coming after this. I think the last one for the use of email
We have to actually do this. We can correct for the system which is the one.
and they didn't print.
Because they have index at the back of the Quran. So any particular subject you're interested, you want to know about this. Yeah, that's about that day I was supposed to explain to you, but so you ran off. So you want to know what all this thing is. So it talks G or G-O-D. Just take G, you see God, all the references pertaining to the creation in the Quran. So it gives you quick reference. So you have a chapter, verse, so you can, flip it over. And you want to know what we will, just go to W. You want to know about Jesus Christ, go to J. You want to know about Prophet Adam, Father, go to E. So, or you want to know about similitudes, how God gives examples of two things to explain to us the difference between white and wrong. Just go to similitudes, S, or
Let's look at the scientific reports. It's quite interesting.
yeah, so you go to the G.
Bees, number of chromosomes.
Yes,
Is it 23 number of times man?
Yes.
Mentioned.
This subject is pretty. That's why I think this one. Sorry, it's today's session. Yes,
Because this brother will be
traveling.
traveling.
I'll be letting you.
There's a lot of changes from that file anyway. We will email the updated one. Okay, all the changes.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. I would like to welcome all of you with Islamic greetings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings be upon all of you. Now, a small apology from my end. We had a change of schedule. Today was supposed to be on Islamic manners, I believe, but since I was traveling, I'll be traveling soon, so I had to push my subject, prepone it from the 3rd of next month to today. So I hope you all accept my apology. So the subject of today is Islam, family, and women. Right? This is a little long, but I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. Right? So I don't need to give you a boring session. I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. And the second thing is, before we proceed, I would, and the updated schedule will be emailed to each individual, I believe, by Brother Yusuf. Right? So before I proceed further into the subject, I would like to know your frank opinion about women in Islam. Just voice out what you know, be it negative or positive, it doesn't matter. You can voice out, it makes the session more interesting. Then I'll be able to relate you to the subject. So you'll be more involved. And give you revelations of what Islamic method of human rights are. So can we just, any one of you can just say what's your idea? You must have heard from medias, books, TV, radio stations, telling you things about women in Islam.
It seems male is more dominant than
Okay. So the view is it's a masculine religion. Islam is a masculine, male-dominated religion, which is very common belief. Yes. For yourself, my sister, any ideas? Subjugation, right? Yourself, mother.
I know in the Middle East, the women cover up their faces across mostly, but I found out it's because maybe they wear the mask. It's called the burqa.
Yeah, niqab. That particular one is called
It's to
niqab.
protect them from the sun.
Sun of the dust. Anything else from your sister?
Every time I pass by this mosque during lunchtime, always those finished worshipping is all, maybe 99% is men coming out from this mosque. Women? Where is it?
You can put this as a question. And I should be able to answer that. Yourself, my sister.
Well, I thought it's the same, like it's a very male-dominated culture, but when I met, his family from Pakistan, I thought they're very strong personalities and strong rights.
Any other views? Or shall we put yes?
I mean, the woman will not treat as well as the man.
So yeah, again, it's oppression.
Inequality.
Equality is not there. But see, this is good. See, this is supposed to be educational, session, not just I come lecture and then I move away, and you still have those doubts. Right? Anyway, now what is Islam saying? That's why I put the first hadith here. This is one of the traditions or the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, God enjoins you to treat women well, for they are your mothers, your daughters, and your aunties. Right? I believe there's just one narration, and I just recited to you.
Lady.
What also you have there? Need water? Or she you wanted water? Okay. Right? Put it here. You let some.
No. May I get the notes? Do you have?
The notes, yes, we have one there.
Oh, thank you.
Right? And then, now we go into the subject. How many of you know this woman, Karen Armstrong? Good. This one of us know. Karen Armstrong is a very, very openly she speaks very open. She's coming from a Christian background. She was a nun. She was brought up as a nun, but she denounced being a nun, and she started reading and studying about the major religions of the world. And in that course, she has written a lot of books on Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Muhammad, the battles of Muhammad, the wives of Muhammad, the book goes on. And her own life, the spiral staircase. What she experienced as a Christian nun and why she denounced being a nun. Now she says, Karen Armstrong emphasizes that during the Middle Ages, the Muslims were horrified to see the way Western Christians treated the women in the Crusade states. So they were horrified to see how women were treated in the Christian world. And Christian scholars denounced Islam for giving too much power to maniacs and slaves and women. So the Christian scholars denounced Islam or criticized Islam because it gave women, slaves, too much of respect, too much of rights. This is in her book, so the references are given. I've given this in the conclusion of the notes. And in the same book, she says, we must remember what life had been like for women in the pre-Islamic period. This is before the advent of Islam, before the advent of Prophet Muhammad claiming to be a prophet. So she says, you must remember how life must have been for the people, the women in the pre-Islamic period when female infanticide. You know what is that? As soon as the baby is a baby girl, she was buried alive in Mecca by the Arabs because they considered female child was a disgrace to them and it would weaken the family hold or in a large scale the tribal hold. So they would bury their daughters alive. The same thing the Indians are doing today according to BBC report by a reporter who read a beautiful article, Let Her Die, where she given the number of children who are being completely eradicated while they're in the womb as soon as they're identified as females. Because in Indian culture, according to the Hindus, they consider female child to be a disgrace, and they consider female child to be a burden economically. Right? So what they do, as soon as doctor says this is a female child, they'll abort it. So this is still happening today. Likes which was a norm, and when women had no rights at all, like slaves, women were treated as an inferior species who had no legal existence at all. You have no legal existence. That means you're not recognized as a flesh and blood, as a part of the society. And then she said, in such primitive world, what Muhammad achieved for women was extraordinary. We will examine that. That's what we are going to examine. The very idea that women could be witness or could inherit anything at all in her own rights was astonishing. So women could inherit from the father was itself a mileage for the women of that time. That's according to other Muslim women. She is a Christian, but she's no longer Christian now. She denounced it. Now she is teaching as a instructor in the university in Judaism. This is what she writes in her book. Now let us examine. And I actually read this Quranic verse to you. I'm going to give you the next 1 hour of the explanation to what I read. That's all the session is going to be. Now, human rights according to the UN Charter. The UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was drafted between Jan 1947 and December 1948. So it took them 1 year to draft. And I'm just giving you a summary of it, and I put the source of the record in my notes, so I can always go back to get a detailed information of each phrase and the rights. Article number 1 states that all human beings are born equal in dignity and rights, which we all agree, and that's what Islam says too. They are endorsed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in spirit of brotherhood. That's how I put that. Number 2, Article 2 continues. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national or social origin, property, birth, and other status. Article number 3 through 21, it says, specific civil and political rights in these articles, rights set forth include the right of life, liberty, a fair trial, free speech, privacy, of personal security and of movements, as well as freedom from slavery, torture, and arbitrary arrest. And then Article 22 through 27 says, provide for economy, social and cultural rights. These rights are specified as an indispensable aspect of an individual's life, being necessary for one, dignity and personal development, and include economic rights such as rights to social security, economy, work-related rights, and on forth. Finally, Article 28 through 30 establishes a general framework to provide for enjoyment of human rights, the reconciliation of rights, to a social and international system that promotes human rights, and on forth. It goes until 30 different articles, which took 53 members from human rights and charter-based body, mostly directly dealing with areas of human rights. A universal human right was drafted over the period of 1 long year. And this is not very far away. This is 1947. It was the time of our fathers and our mothers. But I give you an important note. The human rights in Islam begins, that's what you don't see in UN Charter, because they can't think in those terms, because what Islam teaches is a revelation, not a man-made system. Human right begins the moment the child is given life in the womb. That's what you don't see in the human child. The very moment the child is formed in the womb and it starts to breathe, the heart starts to pump, that's when God sends the angel to give life to it. Once that life is given, the rights of the child is dictated at that point in time. That's the reason why in Islam abortion is not permissible except on two situations. Number one, if the victim is a rape case, or if the mother's life is in a greater threat if the baby comes out, then Islam says, fine, you can go and abort the child if the mother has to lose her life if she has to bring this baby into the world. Because as a mother, she already has responsibilities. Unlike the child is yet to be born, which has no responsibility. So that's how Islam puts it away. And then, this is according to you and child. Now let us see how the people in the past treated women in other societies. Like for example, in Athens, Rome. Why I refer to these nations, not other nations, is because at that time, these were the superpower of the world. They were what we call, what you know today as United States. Powerful, might. They were might. They have military power and economic power. And it says women's status had degenerated to that of slaves. Wives were secluded in their homes. Even in their own homes, they were disregarded or secluded from the bigger circle in the house. Had no education and few rights and were considered by their husbands no better than chattels. You know what is chattels? Something very inferior. Something that you don't even consider it exists. And then, in ancient Rome, a woman's legal position was one of complete subordination, first to the power of her father or brother, and later to that of her husband, who held paternal power over his wife. In the eyes of the law, women were regarded as imbeciles, means slaves. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, 1984, volume 9, page 909. Now, if that was the case with the superpower, then what about the Arabs? Arabs were people, nobody wanted to give them a second look. Great discoverers, the people who journeyed the world at that time, passed by these Arab people. But they said these people are human garbage. So they didn't bother to even enter or conquer them. So now we go back to the pre-Islam. Before we move on to the pre-Islamic period, I would like to bring you to this very important narration of the Prophet. How women were treated. I think this one narration is enough to give you an overall view of how the situation was in the 7th century during or before the advent of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, before he claimed prophethood. Here, prior to the advent of Prophet Muhammad, that was the status of women in the tribal society of Arabia. This is a record, where it is recorded. One day, after Muhammad's declaration of his prophethood, one of his companions came to him and narrated what he had done with his little daughter. So he's coming to Prophet Muhammad. This was something that took place a few years ago before Prophet claimed his prophethood. He's telling him the story of what he did with his daughter. He says, "O Messenger of God, I had a daughter. One day I took her to mother to dress her as I was taking her to her uncle. So a little baby, very innocent, doesn't know what's happening. The only people we trust when we are that young are our parents. And he says, took her to the uncle. The poor mother knew what this meant. So the mother knew what's going to happen to the daughter. So, but she could not do nothing but obey and weep. She's incapable because the society, that's what they were doing in the Arabian Peninsula. So she as a woman could not do anything to protect her own child. All she did was weep and cry. But she could not, and my wife pressed the infant. who was rejoicing at the news of going to the uncle. The child was all happy going to the uncle's house. I took her near a well and told her to look down into the well. Children are innocent. They can't judge between right and wrong. So the baby just looked down. While she was looking into the well, I kicked her into it. So while the baby was looking into the well, he kicked her. That was the situation of women at that time. While she was rolling down, she was shouting, "Daddy, Daddy." As he was recounting this, the Prophet sobered, as if he had lost one of his nearest kinfolks. So Prophet Muhammad started to cry. Out of pain, he could feel the child should have gone through while she was kicked into the bed. As if it was his own family that is missing. So I think this gives you an overall view of how women were treated in the pre-Islamic period. And the Muslims, we call it the days of ignorance. So after the Quranic revelation, it's in the days of enlightenment. People started to go towards education, started to learn mannerism, started to be humans. But before that, this was the situation of women in Arabia. And this is the community that Prophet Muhammad came to as a prophet. Okay, women in the pre-Islamic era. What are the rights they never had? Women cannot choose or refuse in marriage. They can't refuse. The father says you marry the person, you marry. Whether it's of your choice, your life, your voice don't count. Women had no inheritance of any kind. So if you're only daughter and your father has a lot of wealth and he passes away, that money don't come to you. Third, women did not engage in commerce or trade. They were expelled from doing any business transactions. Women were also forbidden to remarry if the husband divorced them. And this system still exists in India. Women cannot remarry if your husband divorces you or your husband passes away. And if the husband passes away in India among the Hindus, till today, in the 21st century, the Hindus have a culture of burning their dead. They don't bury them, they burn them. Incrimination, that's what we call it in English, right? And either the wife has to go and fall in the fire, kill herself. If she refuses, she'll be pushed. And this is very prevalent in the north part of India, not the south. And I come from the south. South is far educated. If a woman's deceased husband had an adult sons from other marriages, the older son among them had the right to add the wife of his deceased father to his household. That means, if I was living in the pre-Arabian period, if I had a stepmother, if my father passes away, I will marry my stepmother. And if she wants freedom, then she has to pay for it. She has to ransom herself for her life and liberty. So either way, women are locked. This was the situation. Finally, women were forbidden to eat certain food. That's the funniest part. Actually, Quran talks about it. God Almighty criticizes these Arabs for doing what they're doing. They forbid upon women the good meat. And they say this is for men. And the lousy ones, these are for you. This is how they regarded women in the pre-Islamic period. So you can imagine, you can just try to imagine, you've got to transport yourself to that situation. If you were the women of that time, imagine what your situation would be like. Miserable. Because being born as male or female is not our choice. Being born into any race or culture or any language is not our choice. This is something that came to us because God has decreed that we will be born for certain mothers, certain fathers, carrying certain complexions, speaking certain languages, and following the certain culture and ethnicity. Right? You don't choose your color, you don't choose your race. So how can you blame women because they're women? It's not their choice. look how Islam elevated women. Now, this is the verse I actually read to you before I started. And then before we proceed to this, the Quran also says about children being buried alive. God says, when the female infant buried alive is questioned for what crime she was killed. You see, God Almighty is just. That's one of the attributes of God in the Quran. He's most just. So He will raise His children up, and then He will ask them, for what crime were you buried alive? Questions. So the parents have to justify it. Everything in Islam that we have is an amana, it's a gift, it's a trust from the Creator. And when asked, we have to return back. It's wife, family, children, wealth, money, on and on forth. Anything in Islam is a trust. God has given this trust to you. When He wants, He will take it back. So you have to honor it. So these female children will be raised on the day of judgment, and they will be questioned for what crime were you killed. And let's see what they're going to say. And then, in the pre-Islamic period, the Quran also says, when the news is brought to them of the birth of a female child, his face darkens and he's filled with inward grief. You see, the men of this pre-Islamic period, they would grieve. As soon as the message of a female baby is given to them, they would grieve. And his face turns dark. Then immediately he wants to bury the baby alive. So, in the Islamic, so now coming to the translation, it says, this is the verse I read to you. O mankind, reverent your guardian Lord, who created you from a single person, created of like nature, His mate. So the women that we have, our wives, our children, our daughters, are like us. They created from us. And then God made them scatter. God made all of us scatter throughout the world. Countless men and women, reverend God, through whom He demands your mutual rights. And reverend